I still remember the way the soil felt between my fingers the day I first bought this land, warm, alive, promising. 40 years later, that same soil feels colder. Maybe it's because she's gone now, or maybe it's because of what my own son did to me. When my wife, Mary, passed, I thought I'd live out my final years quietly here, tending to the garden she planted, watching the sunrise over the old oak tree we buried our wedding rings beneath. This ranch was ours, every nail, every fence post, every grain of dust. Then one afternoon, my son, Ethan, drove up in his brand new truck, the kind that costs more than the house I grew up in. He walked around like a stranger inspecting property, not his childhood home. "Dad," he said, flashing that polished smile he must have learned in the city, "you've worked hard your whole life. Let me take it from here. You deserve to rest." For a second, I almost believed he meant well. But the way he said take it, like this land was some burden to be removed, made something twist in my gut. When he mentioned partners and investment opportunities, I realized this wasn't about me retiring. It was about him owning what I built. That night, I sat on the porch, the wooden boards creaking under my old boots, and watched the stars fade into dawn. The same sky I used to show him as a boy, telling him, "Son, a man's land is his promise to the people he loves." Now, that promise was being tested, not by strangers, but by my own blood. And I didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning of a war I never wanted to fight. The morning I found out the truth, the air felt heavier than usual, like the ranch itself was holding its breath. I was sipping my coffee on the porch when I saw a car I didn't recognize pull up to the gate. Two men in suits stepped out, clipboards in hand, measuring the fence line like it was theirs. I walked down the path, my boots crunching on the gravel. "Can I help you, boys?" I asked. One of them smiled politely. "We're from Redwood Development. Your son Ethan told us to take some preliminary measurements." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Ethan, my son? The same boy who used to chase fireflies in this yard now had strangers surveying my land like I was already gone. I felt my hands tighten around the coffee mug until it cracked in half. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the same table Mary and I built together. Her scarf hung on the chair across from me, soft, faded, and heavy with memories. I ran my fingers through it, whispering her name. She used to say, "A man's home isn't just where he lives. It's where his soul takes root." Ethan was trying to uproot me. The next day, I drove into town. The realtor confirmed it. Ethan had already started the paperwork to sell the property. He'd even forged my signature on the preliminary documents. I stared at that fake scrawl, my name, John Miller, written like it meant nothing. On my way home, I passed the oak tree where we buried our rings. I stopped the truck and sat there for what felt like hours. The wind howled through the branches, whispering the same words over and over. He forgot who built it. And in that moment, I made a silent promise. He might have forgotten, but I'd make sure he remembered. 3 days later, Ethan showed up again, same polished smile, same shiny truck, but this time with that confident swagger of a man who thinks he's already won. I was waiting for him by the barn, the morning sun cutting long shadows across the yard. The smell of hay and rain still lingered in the air. "Dad, why didn't you call me back?" he asked, acting like nothing had happened. "We could have handled all this quietly. It's business, not personal." I laughed, the kind of bitter laugh that comes from years of holding back anger. "Business?" I said, stepping closer. "You call selling your mother's home business? The land she planted her garden on? The house where you took your first steps?" He shifted his weight, suddenly unsure. "You don't understand, Dad. Times are different now. You can't just sit on old dirt and call it a legacy." That word, legacy, hit me harder than any insult could. I pointed toward the oak tree on the hill. "That old dirt fed you, sheltered you, gave you a name. Every board in that house was nailed by my hands, every fence post dug with my sweat. You think you built this? You just inherited it." Ethan tried to speak, but I cut him off. "You're not taking this land from me. Not while I'm still breathing." For a moment, silence. Then his eyes turned cold. "Maybe that's the problem," he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. That was the first time I realized how far he'd gone, how much greed had replaced the boy I once knew. I watched him drive away, the dust from his tires rising like smoke. I stood there alone, heart pounding, fists trembling, knowing one truth that burned deeper than the pain: this wasn't just about land anymore. It was about a father's dignity, and no son, no matter how entitled, was going to take that from me. That night, the storm rolled in like a curse. Lightning flashed over the hills, thunder cracked across the valley, and the old house shook with every gust. I sat by the window, watching the rain slash against the glass, thinking of the son I once carried on my shoulders through these same fields. On the table in front of me lay Mary's scarf, still smelling faintly of her perfume, and beside it, the legal letter confirming Ethan's intent to finalize the sale. I could barely read the words through the blur in my eyes. The ink on the paper bled where my tears fell. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and stepped outside. The wind tore at my hat, the mud clung to my boots, but I didn't care. I marched straight toward the barn, our barn, the one Ethan now called a liability. Inside, everything was exactly as she left it. The old rocking chair, the faded photo on the beam, and her initials carved beside mine. "Mary," I whispered. I tried to raise him right. My voice cracked, swallowed by the thunder. But I failed, didn't I? Just then, headlights cut through the darkness. Ethan's truck screeched to a stop outside. He stumbled in, rain-soaked and pale, his eyes wild. "Dad, stop this," he shouted. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I turned to him, my face lit by a flash of lightning. "Harder for who, son? For the man who forgot his roots, or for the father who's watching his legacy burn?" He froze. For the first time, he looked like the boy I remembered. Small, scared, lost. "I didn't do this to hurt you," he said quietly. I thought you didn't care anymore." I took a step forward, my hand shaking as I pointed toward the family photo still nailed to the wall. "That's what happens when you start counting money instead of memories, Ethan." The rain roared louder. Neither of us spoke again. He left, slamming the door behind him. The echo rattled through my chest. And in that moment, I realized something brutal. I hadn't just lost my land. I had lost my son. Morning came slow, gray, heavy, and cold. The storm had passed, but it left the world soaked in silence. I sat on the porch again, the wood still damp beneath my boots, staring at the horizon where the fields met the mist. Every corner of this land told a story, and for the first time, I feared mine might be coming to an end. The sound of tires crunching over gravel broke the quiet. Ethan's truck rolled up the path, slower than usual. When he stepped out, he looked different, the arrogance gone, his shoulders hunched like the rain had washed something out of him. He didn't say a word at first, just stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at the old oak tree. "Dad," he finally murmured, voice rough. I withdrew the papers. I didn't move. "Why?" He took a deep breath. "Last night, after I left, I went through Mom's things. Found her old journal. She wrote about this place, about you. Said she hoped I'd never forget what these fields meant to you both." He swallowed hard. I guess I did forget. For a moment, the only sound was the wind rustling through the wet grass. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in years, I didn't see the man blinded by greed. I saw the boy who used to bring me coffee in the mornings, who built his first birdhouse beside me. Ethan took a step closer, eyes glistening. "I can't undo what I did. But I can start fixing it." I nodded slowly, the anger in my chest softening like thawing ice. "This land doesn't need fixing, son," I said quietly. "It just needs someone to remember why it was built." He knelt beside the porch, touching the soil with his bare hand, the same earth that had raised him, fed him, shaped him. For the first time in a long time, I let myself breathe. Maybe we couldn't rebuild everything we lost, but standing there in that fragile piece, I realized something Mary would have wanted me to see: forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the final piece of the legacy we leave behind. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, the same creaky wooden table where Mary used to hum while making tea, where Ethan once built toy cars out of scrap wood. The air felt still, heavy with ghosts of conversations long finished. The lantern's dim glow painted soft shadows across the walls, each one a memory I couldn't quite touch but couldn't let go of either. For years, I thought legacy meant possession, land, house, fences, deeds. Things you could touch, count, and pass down. But after everything, I finally understood that wasn't it at all. Legacy wasn't in the soil beneath my boots. It was in the lessons buried in a son's heart, waiting for the right storm to bring them back to the surface. Ethan had gone back to town to handle what he called unfinished business. Before leaving, he turned to me at the gate. "Dad," he said, "Mom wrote something else in her journal. She said you never stopped believing in people, even when they disappointed you." His eyes glistened. I hope one day I earn that kind of faith. When he drove off, I stood in the doorway, the cool night air wrapping around me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the ache of being left behind. I felt peace, the kind that comes not from winning, but from understanding. Mary once told me, a man's worth isn't in what he owns, it's in what he forgives. Now, sitting there with her scarf draped across my shoulders, I finally understood. The fights, the pain, the years of silence, they weren't for nothing. They were the fire that tempered love into something unbreakable. As the wind howled softly outside, I whispered to the empty room, "I kept it all together, Mary. Even when it broke me." And for the first time, I swear I felt her there, in the stillness, in the creak of the floorboards, in the gentle hum of a home that was still alive. The following morning, sunlight finally touched the valley again, soft, golden, forgiving. It spilled across the fields, turning the wet grass into a shimmer of silver and green. I hadn't seen the land look this alive in years. Maybe it wasn't just the weather that changed. Maybe it was me. The old screen door creaked open, and I looked up. Ethan stood there, holding 2 mugs of coffee, the way Mary used to. He gave me a small, nervous smile. "Didn't know if you'd want company," he said. I gestured to the chair across from me. "You brought the good kind?" He grinned faintly. "The one Mom used to make." We sat in silence for a while, just sipping. The sound of birds, the smell of wet earth, the quiet rhythm of 2 men learning to share air again. There were no apologies left to make, they'd all been said, in words, in actions, in the simple act of being here. Finally, Ethan spoke. "I went by the lawyer's office. The property's staying in your name. But," he hesitated, "I'd like to help you run it. Maybe even move back for a while. If you'll let me." I looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, I saw the man Mary always believed he could be. "This land was never mine alone," I said softly. "You've got your mother's fire and my stubbornness. Maybe that's enough to keep it alive." He nodded, his jaw tight, eyes glistening. Then, quietly, he said, "I'm sorry it took losing everything to realize what mattered." I reached across the table, placed my hand over his. "That's the thing about loss, son," I murmured. "Sometimes it's the only way we remember what's worth holding on to." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and wildflowers through the open door. It felt like the house itself was breathing again, lighter, warmer, alive. As we sat there, I imagined Mary smiling somewhere beyond the sunlight, proud that her boys had finally found their way back home. That afternoon, I took Ethan down to the barn, the heart of everything Mary and I built. Dust floated through sunbeams, old tools hung like ghosts on the walls, and the smell of hay brought back decades in an instant. I watched him walk across the wooden floorboards, his steps slow, reverent, like he was stepping through memory itself. "This place used to scare me," he said quietly. "When I was a kid, I thought the shadows were alive." "They are," I said with a half-smile. "Every nail, every beam, it's got a piece of us in it." He turned toward the far wall, where an old photograph hung, Mary, in her garden dress, holding a basket of apples, smiling at me like I was the only man on earth. Ethan stared at it for a long time. "She looks so happy," he whispered. She was, I said softly. Because she believed in what we were building, a home, not just a house. A place where love didn't have to shout to be heard. He swallowed hard. I think I forgot what that looked like. I walked to the old workbench and opened the drawer. Inside was the small wooden box Mary had carved the year Ethan was born. I handed it to him. She wanted you to have this when you were ready. He opened it slowly. Inside was a simple brass key tied to a faded ribbon. He looked up, confused. It's to the back gate, I explained. The one that leads down to the river. She always said that when you found your way back home, you'd need a way to walk freely, not as a stranger, but as her son. Ethan closed his hand around the key, his eyes wet. I don't deserve this. I shook my head. That's where you're wrong. Legacy isn't something you earn, it's something you carry. He looked at me, tears finally falling, and for a long moment, there were no words. Just the sound of the old barn breathing around us, holding decades of laughter, arguments, and love inside its beams. And in that silence, I felt Mary again, not in sorrow, but in peace. Her legacy wasn't the land, or the house, or the name carved on the mailbox. It was us. Father and son, finally remembering what she'd built, not walls, but roots. The next morning, a soft mist covered the fields, the kind that made the world feel quiet, almost sacred. Ethan and I stood by Mary's grave, side by side, the earth still fresh and dark beneath the bouquet of wildflowers he'd gathered himself. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of all the words that didn't need saying. Ethan knelt down, brushed his fingers over her name carved in stone, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. For all the years I was too proud to come home." His voice cracked. "But I'm here now. I'll take care of what you loved." I placed a hand on his shoulder, the cool morning air biting gently at my skin. "She already forgave you, son," I said quietly. "That's what love like hers does, it forgives before you even ask." He looked up at me, eyes shining with tears. "I don't know if I can do this without her." "You won't have to," I said. "She's in everything here, the wind that shakes the trees, the soil under your boots, the light that hits this stone. You'll feel her every day you decide to stay." We stood there a while longer, watching the fog lift as the sun broke through, a pale gold halo wrapping around the land. The same land she fought for, the same land we almost lost to anger and pride. Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out her scarf, the faded blue one she wore every winter. He wrapped it around the wooden cross that marked the edge of her garden. "She always said this color reminded her of peace," he murmured. I smiled faintly. "Then let it stay there, so we never forget what peace looks like." As the breeze carried the scent of wild lavender through the air, I felt the years of bitterness, of silence, of regret, finally loosen their grip. For the first time since she left, the farm didn't feel empty. It felt alive. Reborn. And as Ethan and I turned back toward the house, the place she'd built, the place that built us, I realized something simple, something sacred. She never really left. She just passed the weight of her love into our hands. That evening, as the sun sank low behind the hills, I sat on the porch, the same porch where Mary and I had watched countless sunsets. Ethan was inside, fixing one of the old picture frames that had fallen, humming a tune his mother used to love. The light turned everything gold, the trees, the porch rails, even the dust dancing in the air. I took a slow breath, feeling the cool wind carry the scent of rain and honeysuckle. For the first time in years, the silence felt kind. I looked down at my hands, worn, calloused, but steady. They'd built fences, planted fields, buried memories, and somehow, they were still capable of holding on. The screen door creaked, and Ethan stepped out. He handed me the frame. Inside was an old photo, Mary, standing between us, her smile bright and easy, her hand on both our shoulders. Found this in the attic, he said softly. Thought it belonged here. I set it beside my coffee cup and stared at it for a long time. The sky was fading now, the world caught in that quiet moment before dark. You know, I said, my voice low, your mother always said love doesn't die. It just changes shape. Ethan sat beside me, nodding slowly. Then I guess she's still here, he said. I looked out across the fields, the land glowing in twilight, alive with her touch, her memory, her grace. She never left, I whispered. She just passed it all down, the land, the love, the fight, to us. The last light faded, leaving only the sound of crickets and the soft hum of home. I leaned back, eyes on the stars just beginning to appear, and let the truth settle deep in my chest. The house stood, the fields breathed, and love, the kind that builds, forgives, and endures, had found its way home again. Sometimes it takes losing everything to remember what truly matters. It's not the land we fight for, or the house we build, it's the love that holds it all together. He thought he was coming home to claim what was his. But what he really found was something far greater: forgiveness, legacy, and a piece of his mother that never left. Because love doesn't end when someone's gone. It just changes where it lives.